Good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you who've joined us from across the world. We welcome you to the HFS Unfiltered podcast. As part of this podcast, you can tune into unfiltered insights and perspectives from business leaders across the globe on the future of industry, the power of technology and innovation, and creating solutions that make a difference. I'm Nischala Murthy Kaushik, the Chief Marketing Officer at HFS and your host for this podcast. One of the key insights that we at HFS have is that in 2021, our readers are genuinely interested in hearing authentic perspectives and unfiltered stories from those who are working on different aspects. And in today's podcast, that's exactly what we bring to you. As part of the conversation, you will hear diverse perspectives about what's shaping the future of the energy industry, the role of technology and innovation, and how different players are responding to the changing and evolving market dynamics. At the outset, I welcome our speakers for this podcast, Saurabh Gupta from HFS, Maurice Tayeh from Hatch, and Robin Goswami from Infosys. I would now request the speakers to introduce ourselves. Saurabh.
Hi everyone. My name is Saurabh. I'm the President of Research here at HFS. So I lead our overall research and advisory services. Been in the global services industry for more than 20 years. I started as a software engineer doing AS400 programming, and I realized I wasn't very good at it, so went in different directions. And now I'm here, looking at the industry in different perspectives, especially how emerging technologies are changing the landscape of how we think of different industries. And I think I'm so glad to be speaking to Robin and Maurice today and talk about the energy sector, because that's one industry that will change and is already changing over the next few years.
Thanks, Saurabh. Maurice?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone listening to this great podcast. I'm Maurice Tayeh. I'm the Global Chief Information Officer of Hatch. Hatch is based in Canada, out of the Greater Toronto area, and I'm usually there. But these days, given the pandemic, I'm working from home like everybody else from Houston, Texas. So what's exciting about this podcast is obviously, be able to talk unfiltered and, respond to questions and share my thoughts about where the industry is going. Hatch is a great company that over the past 3 years, we have been, investing heavily in many different areas, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of our thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice. Looking forward to hearing your insights and perspectives. Robin, over to you, please.
Hi, I'm Robin Goswami, Senior Vice President and Head of the Energy Practice at Infosys. I'm based out of Houston, but for the last year working from home, based virtually in the Infosys Houston studio. I've been in the technology industry forever, but in the energy, oil and gas industry for the last 15 years or so. It's really interesting right now. It's a very challenging time and also a very exciting time for the energy industry. I'm really happy to be talking to Saurabh and Maurice on this podcast at this time.
Sure, thanks, Robin. So we'll start the first part of the conversation with what I call setting the stage. We'd like to start by hearing from all of you your perspectives on how the global pandemic has impacted the energy industry. Saurabh, from a research perspective, how do you look at the industry landscape, and what are some of the changes and shifts that you've seen in the past couple of months?
Yeah, look, I think Robin already alluded to it. It's been challenging and exciting at the same time. The challenges came through on the demand and the supply front, right? I think if you look at 2020, the demand for oil dropped to around 6 to 8%, which was the most significant drop since World War II, if I'm not mistaken. And at the same time, and that was largely driven by COVID-19 and what was happening across the globe. At the same time, we saw supply actually increase, and so the demand and the supply equation, there was a sort of a double whammy that the energy sector had to go through, and as a result, that was the challenge, right? But the exciting part is that, uh, and I would love to hear what Maurice and Robin are seeing, but I've seen an acceleration in digital transformation initiatives. Use of emerging technologies has gone through the roof in the energy sector. People who were resisting change are now embracing change, and this whole transition to clean energy, renewables, carbon capture has also increased, quite dramatically. Sustainability has become a big agenda. So I think it has been challenging for the energy sector, but I think if you look at it from a long-term basis, it's a very exciting space right now in this sector. Maurice, what do you think?
Well, I completely agree with you, Saurabh. I've been in this industry for over 25 years, and I can easily say that the excitement that I'm seeing in moving, technology and changing the business model and changing things has really taken a very, very sharp increase over the past, 15 months or so. Um, you know, Hatch have, to a certain extent, really been ahead of the curve. We have started our digital transformation about 5 years ago. And we put in earnest really a plan and start executing this plan in 2018. And so far we have spent literally tens of millions of dollars of figuring out what is really the digital transformation within Hatch and how it's going to impact our business. And when we talk about our business is just we call ourselves in the engineering and construction industry, but it's really serving three different sectors. The biggest one is the mining and metals. The second one is energy, and it's all kinds of energies, from nuclear power to oil and gas and to green energy, and then infrastructure. So the transformation that we have, essentially been observing and seeing is in each one of this sector. It has evolved at its own pace at the beginning, but now it's rapidly changing. Not only from the business point of view, but the technology, that is associated with that. And maybe we'll get a chance later on to talk a little bit about some of this technology. But to build on what you said, the change has been dramatic, especially I would say been accelerated by the COVID pandemic over the past 15 months.
Really echo what Maurice, you and Saurabh said. Just wanted to bring one thing to the fore. The interesting part about the oil and gas industry is it's a cyclical industry, and they are very used to dealing with the downturns. And in that sense, it is it's a set model that they go into when the downturn happens. But this time has been very different, and it's been very different for these other two factors that have been playing. You all talked about the digital transformation, which has been impacting all industries over the last 4 or 5 years. And then the energy transition, which is another very important aspect that has started to play over the last 15 months or so. And that's going to be increasingly relevant for the energy industry and quite a few other industries. I think these two factors have impacted how this pandemic has impacted the energy industry, I believe. Normally, the supply side, the oversupply shocks, or the demand side challenges would have put the energy industry, all of us, to go back into the mode of let's preserve cash, let's hold tight for a little bit of time, and things will come back to normal. I think these two other factors of the digital transformation and the energy transition needs have driven certain things to happen that are different. We saw the same first 6 months of the pandemic. Everybody just was holding tight, trying to find ways to preserve cash, cutting costs wherever they could. But then later last year, we saw them start to come back and start to focus on how do we drive long-term efficiencies and how do we get refocused on the digital transformation and on the energy transition. And that was what was most exciting to me. This is my third downturn in the energy industry that I'm seeing. So this one has been very different and very exciting because of that particular aspect of it.
Yeah, I think, Robin, that's an excellent point, because I think if you look at all the previous downturns, there were two camps. Either you do more or you save money. Uh, and it was one or the other. I think right now what we're going through is do more with less. Uh, and I think that's actually very, very challenging in one way, right? Because we don't have that's a value proposition that we've not really had, right? Is how do you do a lot more with a lot less? And that's the uniqueness in my mind about this particular downturn.
Absolutely.
I think the one thing I would add also to that is that uh, while in the past these ups and downs, if you want, where you could see yourself at some point emerging. I think what this pandemic has really given us is probably a different outlook. That if you don't start changing the business model and the business that you're in, you may not necessarily emerge strong at the end of the day. So it's not just about the efficiencies in the operations, but it's really changing, the sometimes the business you're in. In the energy sector, there are several examples where, companies are not, depending only on fossil fuel to drive their revenues and so on. Now companies are looking for a green energy to drive that growth and so on, to drive the diversity as well. And that's different. That's completely different. If you look at, previous downturns, the latest one being in the, 2015 or 16 or so on and so on, it was absolutely classical, preserve cash until you get back and so on. But now it's all about technology. Is if you don't diversify, the way you run your business, if you don't diversify your portfolio, then it's a different story. It's a different outcome. You may not either emerge, or if you emerge, you may be weak, or you may have a different horizon as far as you know uh, how long can you stay in this market, given the same principles of operating. So it's that we are seeing that is exciting, and it's also driving this investment, if you want, in this industry.
Maurice, I think to add to what Saurabh said, this one, everybody's trying to do more with less. And as you said, Maurice, do it technology. And that is where all of us have been forced to get more creative, find ways to drive efficiencies while continuing the digital transformation journey, and also thinking about how will we make this energy transition happen jointly with our clients.
Thanks, Saurabh, Maurice, and Robin. I think that was a very comprehensive and interesting perspective to understand what's happening in the industry. In our next segment, which I call Let's Talk Unfiltered, we'd like to shift the spotlight to solutions, innovations, and what next in terms of the road forward. So, Saurabh, we'll start with you. How do you see, the different market players in the ecosystem responding to these shifts, and what are some of the innovations and solutions that you think are going to be important as we move forward?
So I think it's again comes back to demand and supply, right? Basically, and demand is changing in two ways. One, there is anticipated lesser demand, not maybe as low as what we saw in COVID-19. Hopefully things will stabilize. Some countries like India are still struggling, but hopefully things will stabilize, but it'll still be lower demand. That's what most projections say. Uh, the consumer behavior towards oil is also changing, right? And there is more acceptance towards greener, you know, um, uh, uh, fuels and greener energy. I think the political rhetoric uh, is starting to change as well. I mentioned sustainability, carbon capture, Those are huge areas as well. So I think there's a lot of innovation that's coming through. I think the one thing that I'll say is, yes, we can talk a lot about technology, and there are, in the oil and gas and the energy sector, from everything from artificial intelligence to smart analytics to blockchain to even quantum computing and edge computing and IoT. We can keep talking about those. I think fundamentally, innovation is also about data. Innovation is also about change management. Innovation is also about people, and innovation is also about process, right? How do we change all of those things? And I think that's what I'm at least most excited about, is this a more holistic framework, because we can throw as much money as we want on just technology, but I'm not sure if technology alone will solve for what we are trying to solve for.
Well, to build on Saurabh's comments and feedback, excellent feedback. Um, for me, I look at what's driving the innovation. What's the business driver for that? And while there may be several business drivers, the main one, in my mind, is as follow. How's tomorrow's, if you want, connected worker, knowledge worker is going to work? How? Today, we say, oh, I'm working from home because of the pandemic. That's fine. But how's tomorrow's worker who's, given, if you want, it's going to be connected, going to work and be productive and so on. And to do that, you start looking really at various technologies. So if we stick to our business, which is, as I said, in the engineering, all the way to construction, can we think, for example, how the current business processes are done today versus how they can be in the future, where as we work on a given project from multiple offices, from with multiple partners, how's, for example, virtual reality uh, going to impact, for example, the way we design, the way we review a 3D model? How are we going to be able to do the same? For example, create documents, create drawings, and be able to review them, annotate them, share them, collaborate with our people around the world. The same if, for example, we have a construction worker at site, while in the past they may go and observe things and write a report and come back and do something. Today, all this stuff can be done, frankly, in real time. Somebody could be at site and having capabilities that can be transmitted to engineers sitting in the office, at home, in any country, and be able to get feedback immediately on how to solve such a problem, or how to fix something, or how to maintain something. So to me, if you want, before we start talking about what are you doing in machine learning, or what are you doing in blockchain, or what are you doing in something, what's the business driver? And the business driver for me is, as I said, one of them is, how's tomorrow knowledge worker going to perform the task given to them? And beyond that, when we start looking, you'll see all the technologies that needs to be put in place and so on. So that's a quick feedback from my end.
Just add to that, the drivers that are changing the industry has in some ways forced us to adapt also, and become a lot more different in how we deal with our clients. And there are three factors that play a lot out here from a service provider perspective, specifically Infosys. One is, Infosys has always been a technology company. That is what we are, that is what we do. We just focus on technology, and that has been a critical core for us for the last 40 years of our existence. Second part, over the last 15 to 20 years, we've understood the domain extremely well. We understand the energy, oil and gas domain extremely well. The third part is, we've always looked to partner with our clients. And the chain that has happened over the last few years or so is driven primarily from technology. It is driven where technology is the enabler. As Saurabh, you pointed out, it is not just technology, but technology is a key part of it. And the fact that we understand the domain, that we are a technology company and we are looking to partner with our clients has helped us tremendously during this time where all of these changes are happening. And it has helped us work and create solutions with clients which are very different from the normal. Normally, 5 years ago, we would have clients tell us, we want you to do this, and we would figure out and plan on that. More and more, we are sitting down and we are trying to chart a journey and a path, and how are we going to make this happen? And that is when it comes to digital transformation. When it comes to energy transition, it's even more unclear. And that is where it is not just us and our clients. Then we need analysts, we need partners, we need academia, and we need all of this ecosystem to come together, genuinely start to work on where are we going to go and how are we going to make this happen. And that is where a lot of creative solutions are coming up. And that is what makes it very exciting right now, that it is not just us doing back and forth with our clients. It is a group of companies, individuals getting together and trying to find out how can we do this differently.
I think you're absolutely right. In this feedback, Robin, because today we are dependent on the entire ecosystem, not just companies, and working in the past, as you mentioned, with technology companies like Infosys and others in a very formal, contractual way. I mean, yes, that still exists, but the problems that we're trying to solve and so on are much bigger than one company can address. Whether you're talking about domain knowledge, which companies like us, obviously has a lot, but how do you take the technology that for example, you guys may excel in and couple it and be able to drive industry solutions. And to me, it's like you, I've been in the industry for some time. And what I'm seeing really, the collaboration, if you want, today is tighter, is closer. And that's driving, various parts of the supply chain to collaborate a lot more, because it's all about the success, if you want, that everybody's driving at. And it's not just about one piece, one company being successful at something. If you're going to be successful and grow, you got to make sure that everybody else in there obviously is also successful.
Yeah, no, Maurice and Robin, I think we at HFS have this have this sort of framework of what innovation is, and I think the scope of innovation has changed, and it has changed suddenly over the last 12 months, right? So I think when we thought of innovation, it was largely dependent on a functional innovation, right? We would transform our refineries, we would transform our distribution, we would transform our finance and accounting, we would transform IT, but it was still functional or process centric. I think suddenly that transformation or innovation became enterprise wide, right? How do we become a digital native enterprise, right? Or a cloud native enterprise, right? And now I think it's becoming more ecosystem, right? Wherein it's beyond the four walls of even the enterprise. How do we play in this ecosystem, right? Because if you look at it, no one company can own the customer, right? No matter how big you are, it is the ecosystem that drives customer experience. And I think that's dawning upon us, that it's the ecosystem, Robin, as you mentioned, of not just the energy companies like Hatch, but a broader ecosystem of academicians, analysts, politicians, consumers, industry bodies. We don't have standards, yet. So I think that scope of transformation or scope of innovation has just suddenly expanded, and it's no longer just within the four walls of our organization. And to your point, Maurice, its collaboration is not just, we are still, in one way, we are still struggling with, let's say, IT and business collaboration, right? Those people don't talk to each other. And now we're asking, competitors to collaborate with each other. And that's a challenge.
Okay, so Maurice, I'd like to now, shift the focus on your role as the CIO, right? How are companies like Hatch really reinventing yourself, probably to respond to all the changes that are happening in the industry, and kind of what's the kind of short term and medium term and long term response to, um, you know, to growth?
Um, Excellent question. For me, is first and foremost is having a good vision, a good vision that is supported by by the executives of the company, by the board of the company. Because without a vision, without an understanding what is needed, yes, we can dabble with technology, and you may or may not succeed, and so on. But you really need that number one, not only the vision, but the support and sometimes the patience for it, because this is not something that you can do in 3 months or 6 months. It may take 3 years, or it may take 5 years. It may be something that you're gonna keep doing it and doing for forever, essentially. So and any kind of transformation, any kind of innovation that is required, it takes resources in terms of money, in terms of people, and also the dedication to kind of say, not only I'm gonna invest and do all this good stuff, but I truly want to change the business model that I'm in. So for Hatch, we have taken, if you want, these ideas, these initiatives, and we're working on two, axes, if you want. One is an internal one, which is how do we change internally how we operate and execute projects and so on. And this is something that is absolutely necessary, as I said earlier, to continue to grow and survive, frankly. But also at the same time, what we have as an objective, and that's to a certain extent due to the vision of our board, is how do we take advantage of that, because now you're looking at a new business model to kind of say, not only I can change my work processes and become much more efficient on how to execute something, but now how can I sell these ideas and services and tools and products and make money at it. And to a certain extent, that's really what's driving some of the innovation within Hatch. We have established the necessary organization. We grow in this organization as well, and that's, to me, the the probably the biggest change that I see within Hatch versus other companies out there. So it's we're not necessarily just talking about it. We're doing it. We're putting the money. We're putting the resources. We're teaming up with companies, like Infosys with Robin's, company, to absolutely deliver that. And that's what's needed: the commitment, the vision, and the execution.
That's great to hear, Maurice. Robin, I'd like to shift the focus now to you, right? To just building on what Maurice said, while Hatch is one of your clients, if you look at it from an industry perspective, how are you responding to, the changing strategies, maybe an evolving vision, and, the need for clients in the industry to still be profitable and grow in this, sort of volatile, dynamic, and uncertain market?
This time around, this downturn, there are two fundamental adaptations that we've had to make, and we've alluded to that in the discussion so far. One is the traditional question back and forth that used to come from clients has stopped to more, I have this problem and or I need to do this, and how do we make it happen? Which is why this, what we all just discussed, the need to bring an ecosystem to find a solution to that. And the second thing, which seemed very unreasonable to start with, but when you look at it, it is a reality. I want to do all of this, but I don't have the money. So how do I make it happen? And it, as I said, looked unreasonable to start with. But when you really start to think about the problem and you get an ecosystem together of analysts, academicians, and others to start to figure out how you will do it, you realize that there are creative ways to monetize assets that clients have. There are creative ways to drive efficiencies and drive money out of those efficiencies. And there are ways to leverage balance sheets that we can, because we are in a different industry, if you may. And all of that comes together to then find ways to fund digital transformations and to fund energy transition. So those are the two key adaptations that we have found absolutely critical in the last 8 or 9 months. And the good part is clients are throwing these problems at us, and they're not, they don't have answers, and they are willing to look at any answers that come out and look creatively at different solutions and look beyond the traditional boundaries of just being within this industry only.
Just to add to Robin's comment, it's really about the survival, because companies have realized that the way of doing business, today may not necessarily be the way of doing business tomorrow. And if they don't change, the execution, model, if they don't change the operational model, if they don't change the way they make money, it may be a lot more difficult in the future to sustain all the changes around them and actually continue to exist. So it's a necessity if you want to survive.
Those are great points, Robin and Maurice. But I'm just curious to know, with all these shifts and changes that are happening, I'm sensing there's a change in, strategy, priorities, business model, operating model, commercial models, how we even execute programs, ways of working. And all these things really then translate into a change in probably the skill sets we need in the people who are working for us in multiple of these programs. So I'm curious to hear from all of you in terms of what shifts are you seeing in terms of skills, and what would be your kind of advice to people who are listening in terms of what kind of skills that they probably need to develop, either from a domain perspective, leadership perspective, or just technology perspective.
Go first on that. It's a very important point that you raise, Nischala. You use the word skills. And what we are used to traditionally across industries, not just in the energy industry or in the technology industry, is we're used to degrees. Everybody would get a degree, and that would be the end of your formal education. And then you would get to a job and you would work for the next 20, 30 years. But Saurabh talked about in his introduction, he was an AS400 programmer. I was an AS400 programmer a long time ago. Nobody programs an AS400 now. The languages that we used to program in 30 years ago don't exist anymore. So in the technology space, every 4 or 5 years, everybody has had to learn new skills. And very soon that is coming across industries. So we are going to see an environment where people are going to move away from this very traditional, I'm going to go to college, get a degree, that's the end of my education, to a continuous learning process where you're always looking to learn new skills. As we get into a lot of this augmented reality, virtual reality, there will be new skills to be learned out there that will be very relevant for workers of the future. And it is not a 4-year degree program that you have to do, possibly a 6-week upskilling that you have to do. So we are starting to see the beginning of that massive transformation in how education is done, more importantly, how reskilling is done, because it is going to be relevant for everybody across industries.
It's hard to beat Robin's answer on that one. I think the only thing that I'd say is I don't think Infosys is a technology company. I think Infosys is a people company, right? The ultimately what stands Infosys and others like Infosys is their ability to develop talent, attract, retain, and develop talent. That's, I think, your core competitive differentiation in my humble opinion. Now that talent has to do something with technology is is there, but ultimately we are all people company, right? At the end of the day, whether you're HFS, whether you're Hatch, whether you're Infosys, we are all ultimately people company, and we all have to think about these skill sets of the future. And I think one of the most important skill sets, in fact we did some research on this, is around digital fluency. And what I mean by that is, you can't have business professionals today who don't understand technology, and you can't have technologists who don't understand business at all. You can have spikes, but if you're an IT professional, you still need to understand the business domain somewhat. And if you are a business professional, you need to be able to operate some of the software. And I think that in one of the recent surveys came out as the most important critical survival skill that we need. And I think that's still an underinvested area. We still are hiring different people for different, you know, jobs. And I think these worlds are converging very, very fast with us. But it's it's a question that hasn't been solved in my mind. It's still an evolving discussion and a debate.
Look, I'll chip in, a couple of my thoughts here because it's something that is extremely interesting subject. Right in the core values of Hatch is we say, we're professionals, we're engineers with a technology soul, if you want, and that's to a certain extent dives really into the challenge that we have when we talk about skills, when we talk about how do you keep upgrading these skills based on the environment that you're in today or in the next 3 to 5 years or so on. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that you absolutely have to take on and be able to adjust. If you look and talked about the programming, but you can also look at it from an engineering point of view. How, for example, drawings used to be done just literally 20 years ago, how they are done today, how would they be done in 5 or 10 years from now? We talked about virtual reality or augmented reality, and that's all about how do I get this information, be able to visualize it. And if you just look 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the change has been dramatic, and the skill sets that you used to have changed, quite a bit. So the challenge is really at not only the company as an organization, but also to the people. You have to take it as an individual and be able to grow, to be able to change with that. Because one can say, okay, I'll stay within my programming environment, and I know very well. But the world is moving, technology is moving, and the pace of this evolution is much faster. So it's my point is, companies can certainly have the vision, can drive all this stuff, but it's also up to us individuals to have the capability to understand that we can't sit still and expect things to move. We have to change as well.
Thanks, Maurice. I think that's some great food for thought for anyone who's listening into this podcast. I think skills is something we all need to consciously work on. And I think it's a great perspective. While organizations can provide the tools and programs and enabling environment to enhance our skills, there is a sense of personal responsibility that we need to take as professionals as we move forward in our careers. So thanks for sharing those perspectives. We now come into the last segment, which is really about looking into the future. And I'll start with a question which I would like to hear from all three of you. What do you think the energy industry will look like, say, in 2025?
Start. Uh, One key thing that struck me at the start of this pandemic was how quickly we went to working remotely and how much resistance we had to working remotely prior to that. Technology has been there for probably 10 years, but we refused to use it for a variety of reasons. And then overnight, within a week, we were using those technologies. And for a year, I have been functioning fairly productively using all of those technologies. And that is, I think, the critical part. The Saurabh talked about it, Maurice talked about it. The focus on the change and the driving the change is very important. And that change has started to happen in the energy industry. And that's very encouraging to see. That willingness to realize that the digital transformation is here and we have to continue pushing forward in that. So I definitely hope that in 2025, we will see companies being a lot more digital. Energy transition is a lot more of an open area. And again, there is a huge push from the media, from the public, from regulatory authorities, from politicians, everybody, which is again forcing this energy transition to become front and center. And I believe that is really going to start to answer a lot of questions, because we genuinely don't know what it will be like in 2025 and in 2030. And it is still a long unknown. A lot of experiments are being tried, but I hope to see some clarity by 2025 on to how are we going to achieve the climate goals that we have set for ourselves as a civilization, really. But that is what is the exciting part, that I hope to see us be a lot more digital in 2025 and some more clarity on where is energy transition taking us.
I'll go next. So I think Nischala, the way that we define, our industries will change, and it's already changing. And by 2025, it will look very different than it is today. Today we have oil and gas, we have utilities, right? And I think those are already starting to converge. Now, if you see what's happening with, the uh, advent of batteries, and where does that industry stand? What is that industry? So I think the traditional way of how we've looked at these industries is going to change. The value chains are merging into each other. The value propositions are merging into each other. Um, should we look at BP and Shell as retail industries or energy industries, right? Shell has perhaps has higher number of retail outlets than perhaps even Walmart, right? So I think the way that we've defined and boxed, different companies into, this is an oil and gas company, this is a, utilities company, is going to change, because companies are trying to figure out new ways of new value propositions. Where does data go? Can data be monetized? And if data is monetized, then what does the new company look like? And I don't have an answer for what that new energy sector will be called, or but that semantics. My sense is these, in 5 years we're going to see a sea of difference in the way that we define and understand this industry and what we do as of today. I don't know, Maurice, if you agree or disagree.
100% agree. 100% agree. And I would add to what you just said, Saurabh. My perspective from really two main points. Number one, the energy industry will continue to be in the energy, business. What might change, or where we might start seeing some changes, is the source of the energy. While it could, was, let's say in general, especially if I'm sitting in Houston, it's fossil fuel driven, a lot of it. Well, that may change. That may start to change. 5 years is not enough to change, completely, but you're going to see certainly the starts of such a change. If you take, if the question is where would the industry be heading in 10, 15 years from now, I think there'll be substantial change in that business. Not necessarily that you're gonna be in a different industry sector, but as I said, it's how energy is, number one, is obtained, is delivered, that will change. Not only at the consumer level, you'll have a lot more electric cars and so on and so forth, but at every different level, industry in general. The other really change is, we talked about the digital transformation and so on, and I would say I would love to see in 5 years where our industry is similar to the Formula One, in, if you want, racing. If you guys get into that, when we talk about digital twin, if you think about it, they have the perfect digital twin. They monitor their cars in real time. So it's not just, well, let me see here how I can add intelligence to my 3D model, how I can do this and this and this. So it makes it into a digital twin, that is not real time, or possibly, you know, if we can get to the point where in our industry we get to similar way as the Formula One, where you have a car driving around and so on, and they have exact digital twin and figuring out and tweaking and making the changes as the car is being driven, if you want. That's we would have done a superb job. Will we get there? I'm not so sure in 5 years, but I'm very optimistic that before too long, we will get there.
It's great to hear. I think exciting times ahead for the industry. So, now my last question of the podcast today: if you had one wish that could come true, what would that be? And Maurice, we'll start with you and we'll go in alphabetical order, please.
One wish. The one wish is essentially, in my opinion, is time. Because like Robin, we've been in this industry for some time, and if I build on my own experience, where we have succeeded and where we have failed, is that you may have a great idea, about how to do, um, you know, introduce technology, make changes, and so on. But these ideas often, especially when you're tackling, major problems, if you don't have the time to execute them, and sometimes you may fail once or twice before you get there, then essentially you're squashing these ideas and so on. So to me, when we talk about technology, I wish I can say it's a plug and play. You take it, you plug it, and then you're up and running. It doesn't work this way. So my only wish is time and patience. Thank you.
Go next. While I absolutely love the idea of colonizing Mars and space, the reality is there is only one planet Earth. And I really wish we could accelerate the reversal of the negative impact that humans are having on the planet. And that's why I'm really, really excited about what is going on with the entire conversation, and not just the conversation, the action behind energy transition.
Yeah, it's always hard to be the last on these questions, but I think I'll echo something that Robin said. I wish that I leave the planet, maybe greener than what I live in for my daughter. And I think we need to change our mindset around the energy industry. I don't think it's the industry to be blamed. I think the energy industry is going to be the change agent to make that happen. And we are struggling with ways to make that happen. But I do feel that the energy industry is going to is what I'm pinning my hopes on to make my wish true, make my wish come true.
And I wish that all your three wishes come true. So thank you so much, Maurice, Robin, and Saurabh. It was an absolutely wonderful conversation. A lot of diverse, interesting perspectives and a lot of food for thought for anyone who's listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you joining us today.